Hello, I'm Stuart Craner. Welcome to this session, which is part of 3 days of webinars venturing into the ecosystem future. I'm director of the Business Ecosystem Alliance, and we're delighted once again to be partnering with the Higher Model Institute on this virtual event, exploring the very latest thinking and best practice in the field of business ecosystems. We are excited that people from more than 50 countries worldwide have signed up for these sessions. So welcome to you wherever you are joining from Bolivia to Belgium. Please send in your comments, thoughts, questions, and queries at any time during the sessions. Our first session today bridges 3 continents. I'm in Europe, and we have guests from America and Japan. Our theme for this session is the impact of ecosystems on the way we work and live. From America, we are joined by Andrea Kates. Andrea was CEO of the San Francisco software company that pioneered the application of lean startup with scale-up and large companies. For 20 years, she's led bold initiatives in virtually every sector and every geography that help companies figure out where to place their bets on emerging products, services, and technologies, and to scale dynamic business models. Before we start, we should recommend that you check out Andrea's newly minted masterclass series, Get to Next. And more information on Andrea's work can be seen at suma.com, SUMA.com. And Andrea is joined by Mohi Ahmed. Mohi is the co-author of Living Service, which came out in 2008. He is a Bangladesh-born Canadian, currently working in Tokyo. He's speaking to us today from the Shimizu Smart Innovation Ecosystem Center. In Tokyo, he leads the Business Innovation Unit at the Shimizu Corporation. He has served as a visiting scholar at Haas Business School, as well as having posts at Harvard Business School and Hitotsubashi University's Business School. Previously, he worked with Fujitsu, where he established and managed the company's Open Innovation Gateway in Silicon Valley. Mohi and Andrea, welcome. Why don't we start, Mohi, with why do we care about ecosystems? And perhaps you should also say a little bit about the Shimizu Corporation, just in case people don't know what it is and what it does.
Sure. Thanks, Stuart. And when we talk about architectural engineering and construction industry, concrete, steel, and even dangerous work environment comes in people's mind. But in reality, I think this industry may be in the closest proximity to ecosystem. And I think Shimizu is not an exception. We are in this industry. And the company, which is kind of 220 years young, and we've been actually in business and also expanding our business globally as well. And ecosystem actually matters a lot to our business, especially when we talk about innovating and continually innovating in our industry.
Yeah, I've been in Tokyo and looked out from Shimizu headquarters, and I think I asked you, which buildings did Shimizu build then? And then somebody showed me an iPad where every dot was a building built by Shimizu, and it was most of Tokyo, as it turned out. So it's one of Japan's most famous and most successful construction and architectural and engineering companies.
Yes, thank you.
So that's what why ecosystems is relevant to Shimizu, Mohi. Andrea, welcome. It's good to talk to you again. And you and Mohi know each other, and you know about his work at Shimizu.
Yeah, it's been such an incredible journey to watch Mohi's and to be a part of the band with Mohi over the years, first at Fujitsu's Open Innovation Gateway and now with Shimizu, and the vision for being able to really take something that is what I would call a big idea, but make it real and make it something that, like this session is all about, how you operationalize something that's a big vision. And I think that that's the excitement about the conversation today, quite frankly, is the concept of an ecosystem is so big. When I first started in getting involved with ecosystems, to be quite frank, it was about, 15 years ago. I was working with Shell, Royal Dutch Shell, and it was really networks, if you think about it. It was like a glorified supply chain or a value chain. And then we became a platform. We were trying to sell energy platforms to other oil companies and other energy companies, and realized that it was really important not to have ourselves be at the center. But to be honest, in those days, it was really a network. And then I watched as the mindset shifted, quite frankly, as in working with Mohi and the Open Innovation Gateway, when you have open innovation and you suddenly have ideas coming from places that were not, quote, predicted. So it wasn't a linear input. It was kind of a wiki input. It was a very different shape. And so suddenly people who were, quote, not in that division were coming up with fantastic ideas, and leadership had to realize that maybe there was something to nodes being the source of great ideas. Once again, I would call that a platform stage. What's exciting about where we are today, and what I'm really interested in talking to Mohi about, because I think that your current work is like the perfect example of the modern mindset, that, you know, today's mindset that every single leader needs to understand, is what it means to go from a network mindset, you know, kind of supply chain, to an interoperable platform, to really something I call it an ecosystem of purpose, where there's some larger North Star that is the reason that people interoperate, and a big vision that I'm really eager to have Mohi describe for us. So I just love being at this moment in business strategy history where we can bring things to that next level and really take full advantage of the community, the relationships, and the vision to get real. And with that, actually, Stuart, would it be okay if I asked Mohi a question?
Yeah.
Because I'm actually really interested, Mohi, having worked with you and watched your work, the challenges within a real company. There are many competing interests, and you come up with something like, oh, let's do an ecosystem. What is it that really makes Shimizu care when you talk about ecosystems? How does it resonate so that the company really gets it and really cares?
Okay, sure. That's a great question. I think as a company like ours, we don't work in a vacuum. We work with a broader ecosystem in practice. And also, we need to continually adapt and evolve with the changing needs. As the ecosystem is a metaphor, as we all know, like the biological network, and organization is not an exception. I think our company is also, for the last 220 years, we have been working together with others and adapting and thriving. And at the same time, I think another important point is we are dealing with some bigger social issues as well. As a company, our goal is to make society more resilient, more inclusive and sustainable. But we can't do it alone. We need not all the smart people only work for us. We need to tap into the broader community, the thinkers, practitioners from across the world as well. So that's why we need to work together with a broader ecosystem.
Okay, so that's really amazing. And this notion of not working in a vacuum is compelling, especially for companies large and with such a great track record. 220 years, did you say? So, yeah. To me, that is, in one mindset, you would say, well, we've been there and done that. We basically know everything. So it's really quite refreshing to realize that your company, and with your leadership, you're leading people to think bigger towards society. I'm wondering if you could give us an example of how you sort of start the conversation, the mindset conversation around, why we should think ecosystems, because I would imagine everybody has organization charts and, 2x2 matrices on their desks. How do you start talking about, wow, we need to think bigger and it's time for ecosystem thinking?
In that, from my own experience, I find context matters. So we need to really look into context. And then if we look into our innovation process, for example, we start with discovery. And the discovery, again, not just by ourselves. As I said, not all the smart people only work with us. So if we are doing shared discovery, then we really need to actually tap into the broader ecosystem to discover. And the discovery or the output of that, I call it big picture. And big picture is not painted by just a genius painter. It can be much better by doing it and painting it together with others. And we can tap into the subject matter experts, no matter where they are from. It could be university, could be other industry, could be individual, doesn't belong to any organizational setup. They could be freelance. They could be NPO, NGO, and so on. So in the discovery phase, broader ecosystem is very crucial from my experience. And then you can get a bigger picture, really compelling, and that's the story. Then once you go to the next phase of the journey, you'll be defining that. So based on that big picture, now you're moving into gradually into the candidate business model, so to speak, because as a business organization, we need to, at the end of the day, deliver on our promise. And then having that candidate business model, you need to, again, work with customers. Then customers could be also part of the customer suppliers, even some competitors could be part of the broader ecosystem. And then from the defined phase, once you have the candidate models, then you need to gradually look into how you can test and validate that business model as a hypothesis. And we need to get out of the building and then refine those by doing it. And doing it, even in a small scale, and early win really matters. So with that, I think we need to really work. And as you say, Andrea, you need to nail it before you scale it. So once you nail it, then you scale it to the next phase. Then as a business, once you know this is going to meet the social need or the customer's need or something product market fit, then you can scale it. And then again, once you're doing it, then you move to the next iteration of another discovery, another possibility. So it's a kind of cyclic and ongoing process. So when I say ecosystem and it needs context, and this is a kind of a summary or the encapsulation of the discovery that I've been finding over and over again through my experience.
Well, there are two things that are really fascinating about the information you just shared. I mean, first of all, I think you nailed something really that's misunderstood, because people take a one-size-fits-all approach to these ecosystems. They say, oh, we know how to do an ecosystem. We need to orchestrate many players, or they'll have one mindset around it. We need to create a lot of flywheels, or they'll get one mental model and they use it throughout the entire process. So at Discover, they do it, at Define, at Refine, and Scale. They're doing kind of one thing. What I think is so critical about what you just said is each phase requires a different approach. And that is very, that's very critical. And I, it's interesting. I was sharing a concept to zoom out a little bit and contextualize this, not for Shimizu, but for a company called Karim, which is a large company in the Gulf states. And I've just worked on a project to try to figure out how banks can use ecosystems, because clearly you cannot have a financial system that is in a vacuum, to use your point from earlier. And it was so interesting to talk to a leader from Karim, because what they said is, we don't want to go in and replace a bank. So in the Discover phase, they use the banks, they use the ecosystem because they want to align with people who already have customer trust. And so in the very beginning, they, start into the market with a mindset of collaboration so that they can, be trusted and provide collaborative services. By the time they get to scale, they still think ecosystem in a different way. And what they said was that, they don't need to own 100% of the customer relationship, but they need to understand who plays best where in an ecosystem as scale occurs, because, nobody can be winner takes all. And ecosystems are so powerful for a company like Karim. Stuart, did you have a question? Because I know lots is happening in the chat.
The DBS Bank in Singapore is using ecosystems a lot more and talks about customer journeys. There's a really good book about DBS Bank by Robin Speculant, tells their story. I really liked the vertical axis on the diagram we just looked at with cogitate, communicate. Mm-hmm. What about and I liked when you were talking about, Andrea, about ecosystem of purpose, but go before that, you were talking about open innovation. And I'm interested because I know Mohi's worked with Henry Chesbrough, who's kind of the pioneer of the idea of open innovation. And how does that relate to ecosystems? Can you have ecosystem? I mean, is open innovation based on ecosystem? Can you have open innovation without ecosystems? What's the relationship between the two? I know you've pioneered open innovation and its use, Mohi. Do you think of them as two different things, or they're just necessary conditions for each other?
One thing about open innovation, in my understanding and my experience, I find it's all about open mind. So how you have open frame of mind in practice of open innovation. So if we relate it to ecosystem that we are talking about, so if we really want to, as we just discussed earlier, we need discover, define, refine, and scale. In each of these stages, those are also practice of open innovation with open frame of mind. And then we are talking about ecosystem in each of those phases. So I think it's quite interrelated. So if the open mind, how you do that and what you do is open innovation, and also you're actually creating the impact. You can see that impact as an ecosystem could be you can see it as an impact as well, but at the same time as how you achieve that impact as well. So it's all interconnected in my view. Andrea, do you like to add anything?
I really like that. And actually, one of the things I love about these sessions is thinking of something for the first time. I mean, that's a really provocative question. So if you don't mind, I'll think out loud about this. There's a dynamic that's required in this open mind that Mohi's talking about, right? So there are lots of techniques. There's design thinking, there's open innovation. There are ways that we've learned over the past 10, 15 years to allow other voices into the room, unexpected voices. And as Mohi said, get out of the building. Don't even worry about your current customers. Think about somebody, an unusual example. And so to me, the spirit of open innovation is very simpatico with ecosystems, in that in an ecosystem, unless you're what we call an ego system, where it's basically l'état c'est moi, like I'm everything and everybody needs to bow to my company and serve us. If you're a true ecosystem, I mean, I think about Airbnb in the United States. There are people cleaning the houses who are not employed by Airbnb. However, there's a symbiotic relationship. I could imagine an open innovation session being really powerful, where you invite many people to give a great idea about how to sanitize a house during COVID, for instance, right? It benefits many people in the ecosystem. And I could imagine open innovation being a technique to fuel ideas that are not predetermined in the structure and the framing of the idea. So that's how I would say that it's almost like Mohi's, really clever way of saying you don't approach ecosystems the same way. There are techniques for allowing new voices in each of the stages that Mohi described, I believe. And open innovation can be a technique to achieve that. Did you have another question, Stuart? Because I have one for Mohi when it's time. But keep going, yeah.
There's a question from Alexandra in Poland. She says, in traditional businesses, it's difficult to move the needle towards ecosystems. Any tips and tricks on how to tackle that? And I suppose the issue for Mohi, I mean, the Japanese corporate culture is often very traditional, fast-moving in some ways and slow-moving in other ways. It's difficult to change, and Shimizu is a large corporation. Changing its emphasis, changing its direction, creating those ecosystems of purpose is very difficult. Getting things to change is very difficult. And what kind of response did you have when you started first talking about ecosystems within Shimizu?
Mm-hmm. Thanks. That's also a really, really important point, which I've been kind of working around every time. So a couple of observations. It's not well structured yet, but the way I say it, first, we really need to look at some people who are open-minded to try something different, try something new. So start with people really matters, and then look into the process. Then the people can be supported with different processes to make it easier for them to engage. And some discovery there. And then the next one, it comes performance. The way I see it, it's simplified. The structure could be people, then process, and performance. And then, very interestingly, and again, it's maybe applicable to other organizations as well, the theory that we all know, that 2-6-2. So in any organization, once you come up with a new idea, some people, they're open-minded, they will take it and embrace it and move with you very quickly. Those are roughly about 20%. And then once you share and create a compelling, shared experience and have your story more compelling, then another 60% people understand and they work together. And another 20%, it's really hard zone. Sometimes, even though you have a very compelling story, they don't want to even understand or don't want to listen to you. So the approach I'm taking right now, currently heavily focusing on those first 20%, and then co-creating the idea, and then also embracing the next round of people, which is about 60%. And if we are creating and sharing with them that this is our direction, this is how we are getting there, but not setting up rules, but people can join in. Let me tell you one concrete example. We recently started an internal movement. I call it We Innovate. We Innovate, we is us across the company in our case. And innovate, I called it in verb form, not innovation, but innovate. And We Innovate is an invitation to our colleagues across the company saying that this is where we are heading to. And if you are interested, you are invited to join the journey. And that's how we are not telling them what they should be doing, but we are engaging and letting them to embrace. And we found a huge change. Actually, people from all across the country proactively joined the board, and then they're working with me. They are not reporting to me, but they are part of the broader internal ecosystem. I don't know if that's going to be a kind of somewhat helpful, but that's exactly what I'm doing in practice.
And have you got an example of this at work, Andrea?
It's interesting. I'm working on a project right now in Canada that's a nationwide project, and we're trying to co-create with 1 million people. And it's not a PR thing to co-create with 1 million people. It's actually quite critical to do it. And the old mindset before ecosystems would have been do a campaign, have billboards, do a broadcast. The actual piece of this is that we have these very small nodes of ecosystem champions who care deeply about one aspect of what it will require. It's a small group, deeply committed for their own reasons. And what's really been critical is a rule of thumb. Mohi's already quoted one of my nail it before you scale it. My new one is everyone in an ecosystem needs to be a hero of their own story. Not my story. It's not, here's my slogan, join this 1 million people and you're going to be part of this thing. It's, what's your story? What matters to you? What's your value proposition? And if your story and somebody else's story and somebody else's story can all weave together to create this 1 million person movement, that's the true way to do it. And it's the complete opposite of what has been done traditionally. So this also goes back to Alexandra's question, which is, how you get people on board is not to try to get everyone on board. I mean, it sounds kind of counterintuitive, but I have been swimming against the stream in so many situations in every industry, right? And you can't get people, you shouldn't try to get people to all get on board. It's these small groups that they're in it for their own reasons that are the power of an ecosystem. That's my thought. Any other questions, Stuart?
Yeah, Janka from Germany says the art of ecosystems is not only to have shared value creation and value delivery, but also to achieve shared value capturing, where all partners benefit from value creation. I think you're right on that. Mohi mentioned we innovate. I mean, the bottom line of ecosystems is that they're a means of nurturing and fostering innovation. I think you've got a model for that, or a diagram which explains that, Andrea.
Yeah, I'll let Mohi maybe talk about the next slide. Would you like to do that? I think that it's really important, this concept that you wanted to introduce. First, let me show the slide that you were referencing, Stuart, with cogitate and communicate and co-create and catalyze. Mohi, do you want to speak about that before we go to the next model?
Sure, very briefly, as I already did, but in discovery phase, what we really do there is to catalyze, so that we're talking about engaging people internally and externally. So once we can invite them to join in the journey, then of course we need to make the stories more compelling and at the same time more empathic. That's the cogitation thing talking about. Then what they do together, that's the co-creation thing. But at the same time, unless we share what we are doing, people don't know, even internally or externally. That's where the communication thing, it's kind of cyclic and then continuous process. Then the next slide, where we are talking about different players in the ecosystem, as I briefly mentioned earlier. So in different stages in discovery, where we need much more broader stance and work with much more broader ecosystem. But at the same time, one crucial thing we have to always bear in mind, which is why we are doing it. So if we are talking about just doing it, we want to do it, but that's also would be one way of thinking it. But in my practice, what I found, always have the customer at the center, or the broader society as well. So in the discovery phase, if we are talking about we are wanting to discover a customer's challenge or societal challenge, then we need to engage customers as well. And when it goes to define phase, then also we are dealing with the actual business model. And again, business model, needs to work with customers. So that's, again, we need to emphasize there too. And then it goes on through refine and scale processes as well. So again, and all these are interconnected as well. So, and then people actually in this organization, once we are talking about university, of course, we are talking about great thinkers, practitioners there. And at the same time, when talking about industry, again, at the same time, we're talking about innovators in industry, not only large corporation, but could be smaller startups or small organizations. And another important thing I find, this individual one, which some people doesn't really belong to any of this organizational structure, but they're also contributing a lot in the broader ecosystem as well. And I actually really admire some of their contribution in my works as well. Back to you.
Well, I love that. And I think about the way that people have drawn that picture for many, many years. And I think that the comment that was just made that was so completely spot on is, it's not okay for there to be either greed or mistrust in these ecosystems. And people figure it out pretty quickly. If there isn't some sharing of the wealth or the impact, it ends up that it's not a thriving ecosystem. If it feels as if it's very one-sided or very some people are giving a lot but aren't necessarily benefiting, I think that, and it doesn't have to just be money, but there's got to be that sense of the contribution and the credit and the payback, the value has got to be there. And I'll give you there's a great example, and I worked with the Mayo Clinic, and I'm allowed to tell this story, and I am not responsible for this story, but it was a really striking story that I've told before. I think it's a great example where they knew during COVID that you had to do home healthcare, and they really were all set up to do hospitals. And they knew also that they had to somehow collaborate with some of their, strange, competitors and other people that they weren't familiar with. And to me, an ecosystem is different from just a picture of a network: hospital, patient centricity, patient journey, family. We've seen these pictures so many times. What's different about doing it as an ecosystem is that you start with something like, we have got to go from hospital-based to home-based. That's just a given. And it means that we all need to go in the United States to the federal government, for instance, and get regulations changed so that doctors can make home calls. We all have to go and become very smart about digital healthcare so that there's miniaturization of some of these big machines that are monitors and aren't just in a hospital. You can do it in your bedroom. We all need to figure out ways to take talent and bring it from a nurse or a doctor who's in a hospital to someone who can do it more flexibly in a home. I mean, the whole mindset of an ecosystem is literally the only way to make societal change. And I know Mohi thinks this way as well. To me, that's what people miss if they just look at a picture and go, oh yeah, we have an ecosystem. We have patients and doctors and caregivers and pharmaceutical companies. If it's not operating in this way where many people can have good ideas, many people contribute, as someone said, many people benefit, and the rising tide lifts many ships, not just I'm in the center and my hospital is going to do better, then it's not an ecosystem. Mohi, I know you have specific examples with this. What are your thoughts on this?
Sure. Yeah, I totally agree with what you just said. Let me give you an example. I'm actually working on multiple, I call it missions around, and our missions are focused on remote island to remote areas in the country, and even at the city, and then even at the country level. So just to, because of time, I focus and give you an example in a remote island mission that we are working on right now. So again, with that proper context that we talked about, when we started the discovery part, what are the challenges for that remote island? And we work together with a broader ecosystem in the island and beyond. And our shared discovery there is there are certain problems that people even thought about it. And through that activity, we discovered that very simple in a way, that there's no, education opportunity after high school. So if anybody wants to go any further for further education, they need to leave the island. And then once they really want to come back to the island, there's no job there. So it's a kind of vicious cycle through that shared discovery with the broader ecosystem we discovered. And then we are now working on that, defining how we deal with that kind of challenge. Then we are actually working with, again, the ecosystem in the define phase, the people who are actually going through that problem. And we are actually creating a platform where people can bring in different expertise to deal with that challenge together. How you bring in education opportunity and how you can create new job opportunity or job creation opportunities and so on. So that's how we're working and leveraging or working together with the ecosystem in the remote island mission as well.
And it's worth expanding on that a little bit, Mo, and just explaining a little bit more in that Shimizu is in the business of constructing buildings, and islands traditionally don't have many buildings.
Yes.
So what you're doing is creating or trying to explore whether there is a mutual opportunity for islands and Shimizu by creating an ecosystem rather than just buildings.
Exactly. That's the point. As I said at the very beginning, Shimizu's one kind of vision the company is moving forward. We call it making society more resilient, inclusive, and sustainable. And it doesn't mean that you can solve and deal with all these three areas only by building buildings or tunnels and roads and highways. It needs to look into the society with a much more broader eyes and looking into the actual problem and what are the jobs to be done from the people point of view who are living in that remote island. So the way we are working on this transformational initiative with the broader ecosystem to see the problems as it is and then define it much more clearly, and then working together with the broader ecosystem again to deal with that. And then once we can nail it, and we believe in Japan, there are 14,125 islands across the country, and out of that, 416 are with people, and the rest are kind of remote. And if we can nail one of these islands problem, that can be scaled in many other islands in Japan. And I hope that could be done beyond Japan as well.
Well, I guess Manhattan was an empty island at some stage. Andrea, can we go back to the title of this session, which is Understanding Ecosystems to Change the Way We Work and Live?
Yeah, I mean, I believe that what Shimizu is doing under Mohi's guidance and leadership is a perfect example of something so, as I said earlier, it's so counterintuitive for a company that seems to be, like we used to call it, the edifice complex. You know, we must build buildings. That's all we can do. To step back and think in terms of a future vision, a responsibility to future generations. And when you talk about really operationalizing societal issues, resilience, inclusiveness, sustainability, you can't just think of building buildings. So I find that example really compelling, and I would love for him to talk more about this notion of the title of our session, which is Understanding Ecosystems to Change the Way We Work and Live. I'll give a little example, and then I'd love to go back to Mohi. I mean, as you know, I work with the Edison Awards, which is another global community of innovators. And one of the people on stage with me this year was a wonderful leader from Cargill. And he mentioned that his ecosystem, you know, they're very interested in sustainability, as is everybody. But, you know, they're a chemical company, and they were very involved in an ecosystem of agriculture, trying to protect soil. It's a big idea. It's a fabulous idea. They need ecosystems of, as you can imagine, agribusiness and farmers and soil specialists, et cetera. Okay, so here's the big punchline. Someone in the laboratory, to go back to Mohi's drawing, someone in the laboratory discovered that stevia, which is their big sweetener, could actually be constituted in a laboratory through fermentation. So what do you do if you're a chemist who's a soil specialist and you discover that the real way to be sustainable and protect soil and to be resource conscious is to use fermentation? And suddenly, and this is kind of a joke, I don't know that this is what they do, but I could picture them saying, hey, let's invite a lot of beer masters to our next meeting because they know about fermentation, people who know about kimchi, people who know about pickling. It's a whole different ecosystem that suddenly opens up new possibilities that has huge societal impact. And the thought of everyone in the group, in the audience today, thinking, okay, what ecosystems are we living in today? That's the first thought. The next thought is, what societal change do we believe we must be part of, like soil preservation? And what, therefore, might tomorrow's ecosystem look like? And how do we meet those people? So that, to me, is the new mindset that is possible because of ecosystems, and that really changes the way that we work and live. And Mohi, I would love for you to piggyback on some of that.
Sure. Yeah, I love that analogies. And if I just add 2 points here, every time I'm talking about what I'm talking right now, I actually greatly admire one of the greatest minds of our time, late Professor Clay Christensen. I mean, his jobs to be done idea. So going back to earlier point, I mean, our goal is not to build the building itself. Our goal is to make society more resilient, inclusive, and sustainable. If the building is the place or the thing people are hiring to get their job done, and that's the point we are focusing on with the new initiative that I'm working on inside Shimizu with this business innovation unit. So of course we'd love to build a building. I think this is what we do, but why we care about the building, how we make that job can be done, and what exactly needed. It could be something else. So we are having this kind of conversation with our customers as well, which might be a little bit challenging sometimes, but we find that's the really, really important thing to look at. And the second point I wanted to add, how this whole conversation ecosystem and its impact on how we work and live. I personally actually looking into an area, I call it living civilization, how we can make our whole civilization sustaining. And that idea is still somewhere, is still in a very early stage of conceptualization, how we can overcome fear and greed with courage and collaboration. And that's how this ecosystem again plays a role in it. So how we can make and how this ecosystem can make society and the whole civilization sustaining and thriving in the future.
Yeah, to some extent, Mohi, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head there, in that in some ways ecosystems are fighting against human nature and certainly against traditional organizational structures and processes, in that ecosystems require sharing, openness, fairness, which Andrea was talking about. So you're fighting against a lot of legacy behaviors and perspectives.
Yeah.
I love this living civilization idea, by the way, Mohi. It gives me chills to think that business leaders today are feeling so responsible that their actions are very aspirational. I think it's really important. Mohi, what were you going to say?
Yeah, no, sorry. Stuart's earlier point. Of course, I can see that tides coming from the other side as well. But at the same time, I'm always trying to take a bit of optimistic approach. So going back to this 2-6-2 model. So for the last two, I'm not paying much attention to that for now, heavily focusing on the first 20% who really understand what we're trying, and then the next group who would be able to understand and also wanting to take part in this We Innovate journey. So I think that's how we need to make our time and make our efforts much more fruitful as we can make it.
And I'll say one last thing, and then Stuart, I'd love for you to wrap us up, because one last thing for me is I do a fair amount of work mentoring young people. And by young people, I mean like a 15-year-old AI person, a woman in China who is, 15, and she's working on AI projects. And I'm so optimistic, because this next generation will not stand for companies that don't have soul, that don't have trust, that don't have courage. I feel like the world is going to be left in very good hands as our generations move and this new generation comes in. As I said, I'm full of optimism. They don't have as much to unlearn. And I think it's wonderful, because, we were talking with interns this summer, and it's just a very exciting time. And I had one last thing, a question before Stuart wraps us up. I know we are almost going. Is there one piece of advice to a leader, Mohi? Because it sounds like the audience is people who are dealing with perhaps traditional companies, and they are buying into this and saying, yes, I love it. How am I going to get my team to agree with me other than watching this video? What are your thoughts about how they would get started?
I like to make things simple. So my simple advice would be focus on people, the right set of people who can understand and who can help your journey moving forward, and then have right process there. As we talked about contextualization of ecosystem, discover, defy. I'm not suggesting that's the right one, but everyone may have their own process. Work on your process. And the third one, focus on performance as well. At the end of the day, as a business organization, you need to deliver a result. So these people, process, and performance, all these are interconnected. And if we can focus on those, I believe we can move forward.
Andrea, I think it would be, I really liked the diagrams used and the contextualization of ecosystems. Can you just bring that up on the screen one more time? Because I think that would be
absolutely.
That would be a really useful way to, useful thing to leave people with. So that's contextualization of ecosystems: discover, define, refine, scale. And I think it's a very, as Mohi said, it's a relatively straightforward way of capturing ecosystems. And I particularly like the cogitate, communicate, catalyze, co-create axes. I think there's a lot going on there. As Andrea said, we're out of time, so it would be I wanted to leave you with that because I think that's a really powerful way of understanding what Mohi and Andrea have been talking about. What I'm taking away is the clear sense of ecosystems with purpose, and a clear message that the huge issues facing organizations and civilization more generally require understanding and harnessing of ecosystems to be tackled. So thank you very much, Andrea Kates, for joining us. And thank you very much, Mohi Ahmed from Shimizu in Tokyo. I'm sure Mohi will keep us up to date as Shimizu's ecosystem journey continues, and is also worth checking out Andrea's work, sumo.com. Andrea and Mohi, thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
Great to work with you. Bye, Stuart.